When the dishwasher became a master chef, millionaires were left heartwarmed and shocked. Frankie wiped the sweat from her brow as she stacked the last plate in the dish rack. The familiar clang echoed in the small diner, but it was more than just a sound. It was the heartbeat of Hawkins Glen, a place where dreams simmered along with the daily specials. Every chipped ceramic plate told a story of laughter, love, and the struggle to survive. Blonde hair tugged back in a messy bun, she looked over her shoulder and spotted her two kids, Sammy and Mia, giggling with a couple of regulars at the counter. They looked up to her like she was a superhero. Little did they know, she was just a single mom with a dishwashing job, drowning in dreams of culinary greatness. Frankie, honey, Mrs. Jenkins, a sweet old lady with a penchant for gossip, nudged her elbow as she slid a plate of meatloaf across the counter. You should enter the cooking competition. I believe in you. Frankie hesitated, the thought knocking on the door of her heart. She envisioned herself in the limelight, pots bubbling with flavors from her mother's old recipes, each a precious token of family heritage. But the self-doubt crept in. Would the millionaires really see her as anything but the dishwasher? Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue with encouragement from her friends and the excitement of her kids. Frankie finally decided to give it a shot. Cooking her mother's recipes felt like opening a treasure chest of memories. Each dish was a piece of her past, her mother's comforting chicken pot pie, the spicy chili that brought the family together on cold nights. As she whipped and stirred, her heart raced, fueled by hope and fear. But the millionaires? They played a different game. Their polished words felt like cold steel, judging her as she scrambled to keep up with their pretentious banter. Their sneers weren't just insults, they felt like daggers aimed at her very soul. But with each round, she fought back, turning struggles into dishes that transformed tradition into innovation. Love infused every meal. Then came the twist. Just as she started to make a name for herself, she discovered a spine-chilling link between those millionaires and her past. The revelation sent waves crashing through her spirit. She felt her heart race, not just because of the competition, but the fear of losing her community all over again. The stakes had never been higher. Would she have the courage to face them? As Frankie stepped into the final showdown, her kitchen transformed into a battleground, simmering with determination and dreams. The crowd leaned in, eyes wide with anticipation, as she prepared to serve her piece de resistance, a recipe that held her family's legacy within its very essence. Would it be enough to claim victory, to rise against the tide of privilege? The heart of Hawkins Glen was on the line, and so was her family's future. Frankie felt the heat of the kitchen on her skin, mixing with the anxiety gnawing at her insides. She glanced at her kids in the audience, their faces a spectrum of pride and hope. Sammy's little fists pumped in encouragement while Mia's wide eyes sparkled with belief. The world outside felt like it was slipping away as the panel of millionaires surveyed her every move with laser focus. It was now or never. With each passing second, the pressure intensified. She fought back the voice in her head whispering that she didn't belong here, that she was just a dishwasher from a small town. But she can't let doubts drown her. Frankie inhaled deeply, gathering strength from the memory of her mother's comforting words, reminding her that cooking was an act of love. That's what she needed to channel in this moment. She scooped a mound of her famous chicken pot pie, filling into a flaky crust, the familiar scent igniting nostalgia. Her confidence surged as she recalled family dinners where laughter danced with the aroma of baked goods. Yes, this was her heritage and sharing it was her gift. But then she caught the glimmer in one of the millionaire's eyes, a look so reminiscent of disdain. It cut through her confidence. It reminded her too well of the past she wanted to outrun. Nearing the end of her plating, doubts threatened to overtake her once again. What if they scoffed at her roots? Dicey memories flickered through her mind. Nights spent hiding dreams behind closed doors. Questions like, "Do you think we'll ever have enough?" echoing from her childhood. Panicking, she forced herself to breathe. She had to focus. This dish was more than just chicken and vegetables wrapped in a crust. It was a bridge to her childhood, a way to reclaim everything she had lost. She finished garnishing the pie with fresh herbs, standing tall, with her heart pounding in unison with the clattering of silverware from the front row. "Time's up," announced the judge, a booming voice breaking her concentration. As the judges approached, Frankie felt her breath hitch in her throat. What would they think? When they reached her station, she set down her creation with trembling hands. The first millionaire, a man with a perfectly manicured beard, took a forkful and closed his eyes. A moment stretched into infinity as he savored the bite. The second judge leaned in, eyes sparkling with curiosity, while the third simply stared at her. She could almost feel his doubt radiating off him. "What is this dish?" the bearded man asked, his voice rich but unyielding. "Chicken pot pie," Frankie replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "A recipe from my mother, who taught me that food brings families together." The other judges dove in, and the world grew silent. The tension thickened, and Frankie held her breath, hoping that every layer, every flavor, spoke of the love and creativity she poured into it. They murmured among themselves, words muffled but charged with suspense. Then the man with the beard turned to her. "This is incredible," he exclaimed. "You've made it your own while honoring tradition." In that moment, the tightness in Frankie's chest released. A glimmer of hope peeked through the cloud of uncertainty. But just as joy began to unfurl in her heart, she noticed that third judge, the one who had been unsmiling, scribbling something down. She felt the knot return. What was he writing? As the judges announced their decision, Frankie's world spun. Would it be the victory she dared to dream of, or another door closing in her face? "Frankie," the bearded man started, "can you handle the news that will change your life?" The stakes had never felt so high. With the future of Hawkins Glen and her family in the balance, would she be ready for whatever lay ahead? The answer hung in the air like the aroma of her chicken pot pie, heavy with anticipation. Frankie's heart stopped. Time froze as the bearded man continued. "We were looking for someone with raw talent, someone who understands the emotional connection food can evoke. What you've given us today, it's so much more than a dish. It's a story." The words washed over her, but the third judge's pen continued to scratch against the paper like nails on a chalkboard. Anxiety clawed at her mind. Was this the moment she longed for? Or one more instance of someone judging her worth? However, the judge continued, sharpening the tension. "The competition isn't over yet. We need to see how you perform under pressure. There's a final challenge. Are you ready?" Frankie barely nodded, her mind racing. A final challenge? She hadn't prepared for this. Wasn't this enough? The bearded man leaned closer, a glimmer of mischief in his eye. "You'll have to replicate your dish in half the time with an unexpected twist." Frankie felt the weight of the world bear down on her shoulders. She couldn't let fear overwhelm her again. She thought of her kids, their bright smiles urging her to push forward. This was her chance to prove herself not only to the judges but to her family. "What's the twist?" she asked, forcing herself to sound confident. "Let's just say," the judge grinned, "you'll need to add an international flair to your classic comfort dish." The panic gripped her again. International flair? What did that even mean? Would she turn her chicken pot pie into something unrecognizable? But time was slipping away, and ideas clashed in her mind, battling for dominance. Frankie had to dig deep. She returned to the kitchen station, her heart racing as she gathered ingredients. She recalled a family trip to Mexico where she learned to cook with spices that ignited passion. Perhaps a twist of spice could complement that familiar comfort. She grabbed cumin, fresh cilantro, and a splash of lime juice. Would this be sacrilege, or could it elevate the dish to something transcendent? It was a gamble, but she was all in. With trembling hands, she fried onions with a hint of garlic and added the cumin. A warmth filled her chest as the flavors danced together in a chaotic harmony. This was her heritage colliding with her dreams. Frantic but fluid, she whipped together a spiced chicken filling, tasting as she moved. It was bold, vibrant, nothing like the dish she first created. But that's what made it exciting. The seconds ticked away. Would her mother be proud, or would she be horrified? As time dwindled, Frankie layered her flaky crust over the new mixture, sealing in her hopes and fears. Oven timer set. She stood in front of the panel once again. A whirlwind of emotions flushed across her face. The millionaires took their places. Their gazes felt piercing, digging into her soul. Here it is, she announced, pride lacing her voice, even as trepidation tumbled through her stomach. The bearded man lifted his fork first, followed by the others. As they savored the first bites, the air grew thick with tension. Would she have gone too far? Then silence was replaced by murmurs, soft at first but swelling. Incredible! Such freshness! The flavors Frankie's heart soared. A buzz of hope radiated through her as smiles spread across their faces. Yet her eyes flicked nervously to the third judge. Was he impressed or still doubtful? He scribbled down his notes and Frankie's pulse quickened. As dishes were cleared, she held her breath, wondering if this leap of faith had finally saved her from an endless cycle of struggle, or sent her tumbling back down. Frankie, the bearded man said, a serious edge returning to his voice, you've surprised us. But it's not just about the food today. There it was again. The horizon loomed ahead, shrouded in ambiguity. Frankie's future and her family's hung in the balance. What would they reveal? And would she finally claim the place she had always dreamed of? Or was there yet another curveball waiting for her? The bearded man paused, letting his words hang in the air like a heavy fog. Frankie could almost hear her heart pounding in her ears as she braced herself for what was next. The chatter of the audience faded into a dull hum, and all she could focus on was the steel-cold gaze of the third judge. What do you mean, not just about the food? She managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. The cooking process reveals much about the chef. His eyes narrowed. It's about your story, your journey. You've brought your past here today, but we want to know if you can carry that into the next challenge. Frankie's stomach twisted in knots. What could they possibly want her to do next? Her mind whirled through possibilities that felt more daunting than the actual cooking. It was one thing to prepare a dish. It was another to reveal her soul on a plate. Essentially, he continued, we're looking for resilience. What have you learned along your culinary journey? And how does it translate into what you serve? Frankie drew in a shaky breath. She thought of her childhood, standing on a stool beside her mother while they cooked together in their cramped kitchen. There were times they shared laughter, spices flying through the air, and moments of silence, just the two of them. Would she be able to encapsulate all those memories into this next dish? Time is ticking, the bearded man prompted, snapping her back to reality. With a shaky hand, Frankie nodded to the judges, looking towards the ingredients laid before her. Should she stick with the fusion theme? Or was this her chance to dig deep into her roots again? She had to elevate comfort to a new height. Closing her eyes, Frankie envisioned the warmth of her family kitchen, the sounds, the smells, the knowledge passed down through generations. She envisioned joy mixing with heartache, tradition merging with innovation. Frankie opened her eyes. Okay, she murmured to herself, searching for an idea that would blend both her history and her newfound creativity. She grabbed flour and began to roll dough again, this time with intention. Not just for a crust, but to create a physical representation of her family's love. She prepared to blend classic chicken pot pie elements with her newfound Mexican spirit. She breathed in the scent of cumin, cilantro, and that inherent warmth. 10 minutes left. A voice cried out and panic surged through her veins. Time was not her friend, but she fueled her urgency with memories of laughter-filled dinners and unexpected gatherings. She whisked an egg to create a glaze and brushed it over the crust, gliding it on like a painter's final strokes on canvas. This was her masterpiece, her heart, her family baked into every layer. With just moments to spare, she unloaded the pie from the oven, the crust golden brown and glistening. It was beautiful, a representation of everything that had shaped her. Frankie time, the bearded man said, his voice sharp but laced with an excitement that made her skin tingle with hope. She set the pie down before the panel, her heart pounding in unison with 1,000 thoughts racing through her mind. Could she truly show them who she was through this? Here it is, she said, forcing confidence into her trembling words. A taste of home with a twist. As they dug in, silence fell again. Frankie held her breath, waiting for the reactions. The tension was unbearable, and her thoughts were a whirlwind of anticipation and dread. Her heart sank and soared in rhythm, desperate for their approval, craved for validation more than anything else. Finally, the third judge broke the silence with a nod, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. Now this is something special, he said, turning it over to the others. Hope surged through her as their forks clicked against porcelain. each bite carrying the weight of Frankie's journey. "It's balanced," one murmured. "The spice is brilliant." But, just as Frankie allowed herself to bask in the moment, the bearded man turned serious again. "But we're not finished yet." His eyes glinted with something more. Frankie's heart fell into her stomach once more. What could they possibly want next? What more could they demand of her? With the competition drawing toward its conclusion and her hopes hanging by a fragile thread, she braced for the unexpected. The moment of truth seemed closer than ever. But would she be prepared for what awaited her? "Your next challenge," the bearded man began, his tone grave, "is a family dish." He leaned forward, his eyes piercing through Frankie's uncertainty. "But there's a twist. You'll need to incorporate a story of your choice, something significant that connects you to that dish." "A family dish?" The weight of the request settled heavily on her shoulders. Frankie's mind raced again, memories swirling like the colors in the palette she'd just worked with. What was I going to pick? She thought. There were so many options, and each felt like it came with its own burdens. Could she fully articulate the emotions tied to any of them? "This is your moment," the bearded man continued, a slight smile teasing the corners of his mouth. "We want to see your passion, your heart. This is where you shine." In that instant, the emotional floodgate opened. She could picture her grandmother's famous mole simmering on the stove, rich and deep, a secret family recipe shared only between women. But would she be brave enough to share the story? The story of betrayal, loss, and the joy of life that danced amidst the pain? 30 minutes to create your dish and your narrative. Go. The clock started ticking. With urgency, Frankie pushed against the tide of uncertainty. She grabbed ingredients, her hands moving almost instinctively. Tomatillos, chicken, spices, and chocolate, the rich tapestry of flavors that echoed her heritage. She could practically hear her grandmother's voice guiding her, just as it did those summers as a child when Frankie got lost in the smell of garlic sizzling in oil. With sweat beading on her forehead, she sliced, chopped, and stirred. As she sautéed the garlic, a wave of warmth washed over her. Memories flooded back, stories wrapped in laughter and tears. "This dish isn't just about the food," she whispered to herself. "It's about resilience and love. It's about family, and what it means to carry that legacy forward even in loss." Each ingredient she added represented not just tradition, but the strength she had derived from hardship. She wanted to honor that, to encapsulate the lessons learned through struggle, the very essence of her culinary journey. 10 minutes left. The voice pulled her back into reality. She smoothed the sauce out on a plate, careful to arrange it with the precision she grew up learning. As she played it, she gave it a sparkle of crushed herbs. "Time." Frankie spun, lifting her dish with hope and uncertainty coiling her stomach. She set it down and caught her breath, anticipation tinged with fear. "This," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "is my grandmother's mole. It's more than just a recipe. It's a story of triumph. In every bite, you'll taste the bittersweet memories and the love that binds our family together." The judges took their bites, a hush falling in the room that felt electric. The flavors burst forth. The warmth of the spices intertwined with the richness of the chocolate, leaving them with more than just a taste. The third judge leaned back, a contemplative look on his face. "This is transformative," he murmured, "the way you've linked food to heart. It's powerful." Frankie's heart fluttered, a timid smile breaking through the tension. "That's great," the bearded man interjected, "but what happens when we ask you to share the story in a public setting?" His gaze bore into her, and for a moment she felt exposed, as if her heart had been placed on that plate beside her dish. Would she be strong enough, courageous enough to share her most vulnerable moments in front of strangers? The weight of the discussion pressed down, even heavier than the challenge itself. As the clock ticked toward her next hurdle, she could feel every ounce of doubt creeping back in. Yet beneath that weight lay a whisper of empowerment, a newfound understanding of who she was and who she could become. "Frankie," the bearded man continued, "let us see if you can embrace your entire story and bring it to life." With every heartbeat, hope and fear collided. Could she bare her soul? Would she rise to the occasion? The journey was only beginning, and yet, could she trust herself to take the next step? Frankie stood there, the weight of her own vulnerability hanging in the air like the aroma of her dish. The bearded man's words echoed in her mind, a challenge that felt like both a gift and a curse. She imagined the crowd that would listen, a sea of faces, some interested, others indifferent, but all strangers. She felt the heat of their gazes, their expectations pressing down on her. Stepping away from the judges' table, she sought a moment of solace in the small kitchen space at the back of the arena. She leaned against the cool countertop, breathing in the scent of her mole lingering in the air, a reminder of home. Would discussing her past make the dish taste different? As she snatched a taste from the pot, the bitterness mingled with sweetness just like her life. Her fingers trembled, the memories swirling in her head as they so often did, her grandmother's laughter mixing with the clatter of pots in the kitchen, the warmth of big family gatherings filled with stories told over steaming plates. But the memory of betrayal also loomed heavy, and something deep inside warned her that revealing too much could cut deeper than any knife. "Frankie, you good?" It was Sam, one of her fellow contestants, popping his head into the kitchen. He must have sensed her unease. "You've got this. Just think about your grandmother. Share the love behind the dish." His encouragement struck a chord. Sam's reminder felt like a lifeline, untying the knots of anxiety in her stomach. She thought of how her grandmother persevered through every obstacle, turning hardship into strength. What would she say right now? Frankie whispered to herself, imagining the gentle smile on her grandmother's face, urging her forward. Deciding to harness that energy, she forced a deep breath. She'd share her story. If she could reclaim the narrative around her past, perhaps she could embrace it fully, not just for herself but for all the women who came before her. "Contestants, 5 minutes until we're back." The voice cut through her thoughts, with determination flowing through her veins. Frankie stepped back into the spotlight. The bearded man waited, his arms crossed. The judges observed her, intrigued, as she adjusted the plate before her. "I'd like to share a piece of my heart with you," she began, her voice calm yet crisp. "This mole is my grandmother's recipe, a dish steeped in the history of our family. It carries laughter, tears, and moments of pure joy. But it also holds the weight of our struggles." She hesitated for a moment. Was she really ready to lay bare the family secrets? The memories of her grandmother's struggles as a single woman, trying to raise her family in a world that pushed back at every turn. "Growing up, I learned that life can serve you both sweetness and bitterness," she continued, emboldened by her own conviction. "We faced betrayal, as our family always seemed on the edge of collapsing. But every time we gathered around the table, plates laden with food, we reminded ourselves of the resilience in our bonds." As she shared, she noticed some judges leaning in, their expressions shifting from mere curiosity to something deeper. Genuine connection. "My grandmother taught me that food is not just nourishment. It is our history, our survival, and our love manifested in the form of flavors." Her heart raced as she spoke, pouring her soul into each word. "In every bite of this mole, I hope you find not just the spices of life, but the stories I carry within me." The bearded man nodded slowly, a newfound respect in his eyes. The judges exchanged glances, surprised and moved. "And with your confirmation that love and pain can exist side by side," he said, "how do you plan to reflect that complexity moving forward?" Frankie felt herself tremble at his words. She had declared her truth, but this question felt like another plunge into the depths. Could she keep going? The excitement and dread twisted together, and she realized this moment could empower others. "I plan to embrace my past, share my family's stories, and let that enrich my culinary journey. It's about embracing vulnerability in every flavor I create." The room was heavy with silence as the judges processed her vulnerability. "Powerful," one judge finally whispered, and a sense of relief washed over Frankie. "You're not just making a dish," he continued. "You're crafting a legacy." As she absorbed their words, Frankie felt that flicker of hope ignite anew. Maybe this was just the beginning. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were preparing to challenge her in ways she never imagined. "Next up," the bearded man announced, a slight smile on his lips, "it's time for a surprise twist that will truly test your resolve." Her heart dropped. What could possibly be next? The thrill blended with trepidation, leaving her with one burning question. How much further was she willing to go for her passion? What awaited her on this unpredictable journey? Frankie's pulse quickened as the bearded man grinned, his excitement contagious. What surprise awaited her? She scanned the room, and for the first time the audience felt more like family. She caught Sam's eye, and he nodded, his steadfast belief in her seemingly untouched by the uncertainty swirling in the air. Then it hit her. It wasn't merely the food that was on the line. It was a chance to step even deeper into the world she had barely begun to navigate. A chance to show not just who she was but who she could be. Contestants, you will now face a new challenge. Each of you must incorporate an unexpected ingredient into your final dish. The bearded man's voice boomed through the kitchen, startling everyone. And today's ingredient is chocolate. Gasps erupted from the small crowd of contestants. Chocolate wasn't just sweetness. It was a complexity that could easily overwhelm or harmonize a dish, especially when balanced against the bold flavors of her mole. Frankie's mind raced. Could chocolate elevate her dish? Add richness? It was a gamble, a risk to take, just as she had laid bare her heart moments ago. She felt a flash of her grandmother's wisdom. Cooking is an adventure, mi querida, she recalled her saying. Never shy away from a twist, embrace it. The memory gave her the courage she needed. Panicking wouldn't help. She had to think strategically and fast. Frankie looked back at the pot of moles simmering on the stove. Bold, strong, rich. Chocolate could deepen that complexity. It could become a part of her story. Determined, Frankie sprung into action. She began by sifting together cinnamon, a hint of cayenne, and a pinch of sugar to offset the richness of the chocolate. As she melted dark chocolate over low heat, she felt a rush, one part fear and another part exhilaration. Hey Frankie, Sam's voice broke through her focus almost teasingly. You got this, right? Just don't make it too sweet. She shot him a playful glare, then laughed a little. You know I'm about balance, Sam. I think I can handle it. The swirling sense enveloped her, chocolate weaving through her memories like a warm embrace. She thought of her grandmother's secret stash of chocolate, hidden at the back of the pantry, reserved for special occasions. How they would sneak pieces together, giggling like they were pulling off a great plot. This was special too. Every chop, every stir felt like a piece of her legacy falling into place. She poured the melted chocolate into her mole, watching it transform the rich sauce into something seductive, inviting. Then came the tasting. She dipped a spoon, savoring the harmony of flavors, the earthiness of the spices, the warmth of the chocolate, the tartness of the tomatoes. It felt like a love letter to her family, like she was sharing not just a dish, but all the memories wrapped in it. 5 minutes left, contestants. The announcement pulled her back to the present, the urgency snapping at her heels. She plastered on a smile, reminding herself this wasn't just about winning. It was about sharing who she was and where she came from. With deliberate precision, she plated the mole, garnished it with a sprinkle of fresh lime zest and microgreens, a pop of color against the dark richness. Time's up. As the judges approached, Frankie's heart hammered, mirroring the cadence of her journey. Would they taste the stories, the hurt, the joy? Could they see her? Each judge sampled her mole, their faces obscured by contemplation, and the silence built a weight in the air. She could hardly breathe, waiting for the verdict. The bearded man looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then a smile broke across his face. You've taken a risk and it has paid off beautifully. This is extraordinary. Relief washed over her, tears prickling her eyes. The audience clapped, and through the applause, Frankie felt a sense of belonging that she had longed for. But the moment was fleeting, as the bearded man cleared his throat, shifting the atmosphere once again. But there's one final twist that you weren't expecting. Her heart dropped. Once more. What now? The thrill and trepidation returned, heightening her curiosity. What was next on this unpredictable journey? The bearded man leaned closer, his voice low but commanding. All of you have faced challenges that tested your culinary skills, but now, it's time to test your character. Frankie took a shaky breath. This wasn't just about the cooking anymore. It was about who she was as a person. She glanced around, noticing the expressions of her fellow contestants. Some looked worried, while others wore a mask of determination. What do you mean? The twist, he said, gesturing wildly, is you'll each need to prepare a dish that tells your story, a dish that represents your roots and the experiences that shaped you. And you have 30 minutes. The clock ticked ominously as the reality sank in. This wasn't just pushing boundaries with ingredients anymore. It was about pouring their souls onto a plate. Frankie felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her. Could she share her past with someone who might misjudge? The pressure was on. She closed her eyes for a second, remembering her grandmother's lessons once more. Cooking was personal. It was a celebration of love, tradition, sacrifice. This time, she defused her heritage with her new skills. She envisioned her mother's chicken torta, a street food classic that always brought her a sense of home. Simple yet bursting with flavor, it was the first dish she demastered alongside her mom. If only I could tell the world about my history in one bite, she murmured to herself. Time has started. Get cooking, yelled the bearded man, diving back into their energy. Frankie jumped into action, her heart racing. She grabbed her ingredients: a crisp ciabatta roll, juicy chicken, and fresh vegetables, determined to weave her story into her dish. There was something liberating about it. The sound of sizzling chicken and the rich aroma of sautéing garlic filled her with confidence. She plated it carefully, adding avocados and a drizzle of spicy mayonnaise, a twist she had learned over time. Pride bubbled in her chest as she constructed her dish, and she made sure to sprinkle chopped cilantro on top, a nod to her roots. During this chaotic frenzy, she realized sharing her story tasted like freedom, like acceptance. Time was running out. She presented her dish just as the bearded man and the judges approached. So, tell us about your creation, he prompted, looking genuinely curious. Taking a deep breath, Frankie let her words pour out. This is my version of a torta. The flavors remind me of family gatherings, of laughter and stories shared over meals. It represents not just my heritage but my journey. How sometimes a simple dish can carry the weight of everything we are. As Frankie spoke, she noticed a few judges nodding, their eyes softening. The bearded man's expression changed to one of deep consideration as he tasted her torta. Her hands trembled slightly. Would they connect with her tale? I can taste the love and tradition in this, one judge remarked, finishing the last bite and glancing up at her. It's beautiful. The applause echoed for her once more, filling up the remaining void of uncertainty. Frankie felt lighter, relieved that her story had been shared and understood. But before she could soak in the moment, the bearded man's smile returned, revealing another twist. Now, after tasting your dishes, it's time for a challenge that calls for teamwork. We're bringing something unexpected next. Frankie's heart skipped a beat. Teamwork? What could possibly lay ahead now? The thrill of the unknown swirled in her chest again. But this time with hope. Would she forge new connections? Or would this new challenge deepen the divide? As the bearded man finished speaking, Frankie felt a rush of adrenaline. The atmosphere shifted, the tension palpable. Contestants exchanged nervous glances, gathering their thoughts and wondering how they would create something beautiful together. Your next task, the man clarified, is to form teams of 2. You'll need to create a dish that not only showcases your personal stories, but also combines elements from each of your backgrounds. Frankie's heart raced. The idea of collaboration felt intimidating. She wanted to express her heritage, but also feared overshadowing someone else's story. Across the kitchen she spotted Jules, a fellow contestant who had struggled but showed immense potential. They had shared a few friendly words before, but would they work well together? I choose you, Jules called out as he approached Frankie, his eyes sparkling with determination. Let us show them what we can do. All right, Frankie replied, her voice steadier than she felt. This was a chance to connect, to combine her love for her torta with something uniquely Jules. They quickly brainstormed. Jules shared his family's rice pudding recipe, a comforting dish that reminded him of his grandmother. Frankie thought of how she could incorporate the flavors of her dish into that creamy dessert. Let us make a spiced chicken on top of a savory rice pudding, Frankie suggested. We can add the tortilla into the mix somehow. Jules nodded enthusiastically. It was a unique idea, but she could feel her nerves creeping back. What if they couldn't pull it off? Time was already ticking away, and they needed to work seamlessly as a team. Let us split tasks, Jules proposed. I'll handle the pudding. Can you season the chicken and make that twist with the tortilla? Frankie agreed, and they dove into action. Frankie marinated the chicken with spices, channeling her grandmother's traditional techniques. With each sprinkle of seasoning, memories filled her mind: laughter in the kitchen, stories of resilience shared over meals. Meanwhile, Jules whisked away at the pudding, his focus intense. Frankie admired his concentration, hoping her own efforts would match his ambition. They were feeding off each other's energy, and for the first time, she could feel the spark of teamwork igniting within their culinary dance as the timer ticked down. They assembled their plate. Forked tender chicken rested upon a cloud of creamy rice pudding, garnished with crispy tortilla strips served like a crown. "Look at that," Jules exclaimed, his grin wide as he took a step back to admire their creation. Frankie felt a rush of fulfillment with their dish finally plated. The bearded man circled toward them, curiosity in his eyes. "What do we have here?" Frankie felt a lump in her throat as she explained. "This is a fusion of memories, a spicy chicken atop a savory rice pudding, and the crispy tortilla represents the strength and flavor of our heritage. It's about sharing our stories, a blend of cultures celebrated on one plate." The judges exchanged impressed glances as they sampled their dish, and Frankie couldn't help but feel hopeful. But just then the bearded man cleared his throat, interrupting her thoughts. "Impressive, but remember the competition isn't just about cooking well." Frankie's heart raced again. What was he about to say? Challenges can alter the best of plans. So be ready to adapt. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Frankie glanced at Jules, uncertainty clouding their earlier excitement. "What now?" she whispered. "Because your dishes aren't the only ones we'll be tasting," the man concluded, a sly grin creeping across his face. "There will be surprise elements you'll need to integrate from the other teams." The shock washed over Frankie in waves. Could they really handle the unexpected? Would they thrive under pressure? Or would it break the bond they had only just begun to form? The uncertainty loomed, and Frankie couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far more intense. Franny stood frozen for a moment, the bearded man's words echoing around her like an impending storm. "What do you mean by surprise elements?" She felt the tremor of anxiety ripple through her. "You'll see," he teased, almost gleefully. 3 other teams will create their dishes, and each team will incorporate one of their surprise ingredients into your dish as well. A collective gasp rose around the kitchen. Panic bubbled up, and she exchanged a worried glance with Jules. But shaking off the fear felt impossible. Instead, Frankie remembered her purpose. Hope, legacy, resilience. They had come this far. She wasn't about to back down now. Before she could second-guess herself, she leaned into Jules, whispering, "We've got to focus. Let us see what each team brings to the table, and figure out how to mix it into our dish seamlessly." They sprang into action, gathering near the judges' table, where one by one, teams presented their creations. Frankie and Jules were on high alert, ready to take notes while mapping out possibilities in their minds. Team after team showcased culinary prowess and creativity, until finally one dish caught Frankie's attention. A delightful mango salsa from a team featuring bright tropical flavors, bursting with freshness. "That's it," Frankie exclaimed. "We can use that. The sweetness of the mango will cut through the savory notes and add a whole new layer to our dish." Jules nodded, barely able to contain his excitement. He had spent time exploring and experimenting with different flavor profiles, and Frankie could see the gears turning in his head just like hers. As the last team finished, the pressure mounted further. "All right, teams," the bearded man announced, his voice slicing through the tension. "You have 1 hour to integrate your surprise elements into your final offerings. Go." Franny dove back into the kitchen, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Time was their enemy now, so they split tasks. Jules would manage the rice pudding while Frankie created the mango salsa. They found a rhythm quickly, zipping around each other in the kitchen space, a ballet of culinary chaos. "Look at us go," Jules said, stealing a quick glance at Frankie. "It's like we're meant to be partners." The timer's ominous countdown drumroll underscored their frantic yet joyful dance. She grabbed ripe mangoes, their sweet perfume perfuming the air around her. She diced them swiftly, her hands flying. The excitement of collaboration fed her spirit. She mixed in jalapenos for a kick, cilantro for brightness, and lime juice to balance. "The mango adds that sweet burst we need," she shouted over the clatter of pots and pans. Minutes slipped away, and the last round of ingredients came into play. The rich, spicy notes of the mole combined with the brightness of the mango, reinvigorating their dish from the inside out. "Almost there," she called out as they moved in harmony. She could hardly believe they were close to finishing. They plated the rice pudding with precision and draped a vibrant layer of mango salsa on top of the chicken. Sprinkling cilantro around the dish for color felt like the perfect touch. "Time's up," the authoritative voice announced, and they stepped back, gazing at their creation. It was a beautiful story painted on a plate, blending cultures and memories. As they approached the judges' table with their dish, Frankie's heart raced. The moment felt charged with anticipation. They had poured so much of themselves into this dish. What would the judges think? With trembling hands, she set the dish down. "This is our representation of resilience and celebration," Frankie said, her voice firm despite the butterflies in her stomach. "It combines my family's traditions with a new twist, bringing together the flavors of my grandmother's cooking with the vibrancy of new experiences." The judges lifted their forks, and silence enveloped the space. Each bite felt monumental. The combination of flavors danced on their palates, and Frankie held her breath, hoping they could sense the passion behind it. The bearded man took a long pause before he spoke, his eyes shining with something more profound than before. "This is truly a mosaic of flavors. The sweetness of the mango elevates the dish beautifully while remaining true to your roots. You've crafted something special." Frankie's heart soared. Applause erupted around them, lifting her spirits. She caught Jules' eye, and they shared a victorious grin. But the bearded man looked serious again, and something in his stance indicated they weren't through yet. "Before we announce a winner, we want to take this opportunity to mention that tonight is not just an end but a beginning." Frankie felt a delicious chill run through her. "What do you mean?" she pressed, excitement bubbling within her. "We believe in supporting dreams when we see them," he replied. "And it's time for you all to take your stories onto new platforms. Each of you will have access to local mentorship to elevate your culinary dreams." Joy surged through her as she processed his words. Frankie glanced at the judges and saw empathy and encouragement in their eyes. This opportunity was surreal. Could she really find her place in this vast culinary world? "Every single one of you showed immense courage, and now we want to nurture your dreams," the bearded man announced, his voice full of sincerity. Frankie's hope ignited. This was about so much more than a dish. As the applause continued, she felt that familiar pull at her heart, the love for food, for family, for her roots, for community. Life had thrown her challenges, but in the whirlwind of kitchen battles, she had discovered strength. She had tapped into her past and used it as a bridge to her future. And standing there, amidst the applause and renewal of hope, Frankie felt a warmth wrap around her. She was finally ready to serve her legacy, not just on a plate but in every step she took moving forward. Frankie, you need to subscribe now to make sure you catch the next incredible journey that celebrates countless other stories like yours. This is the moment to show your support for the channel. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach even more dreamers out there. And you need to comment your thoughts and feelings about this epic ending. Every voice matters in our community. Don't wait not even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformation and be inspired. True fans understand the importance of supporting our channel through these simple actions. Let us keep this journey going together.